All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Christine Clair, Willamette Valley Vineyards in Turner, Oregon. It's June 22nd, 2018. And Christine will start you with a nice, easy question, which is why wine?
Why wine? Why getting into wine? Well, I haven't made it very far. I actually grew up at the base of this vineyard, so about 100 yards away is where I was born and raised. And so though when you're younger and don't have any appreciation for the place and industry and all that Oregon is, I think, it does enter your subconscious. And I was very familiar that this hill was an exciting place. And when I was about 4 years old, I actually walked up the gravel driveway. And the weekend that the tasting room opened, I just saw cars entering the driveway, and I followed them up here, and I tried to sell friendship bracelets to the first tasting room visitors, and that was back in 1991. So I kind of joke around with our founder, Jim Renaud, that I've been doing business here pretty much just as long as he has. And we've always just, remained really neighborly and friendly, and he's always very supportive. And when I went to Oregon State, I was studying entrepreneurship and got exposed into wine just really gently through reading Susan Sokol-Blosser's book, At Home in the Vineyard, and knowing that when I came back and visited my parents here, that there was a lot going on at Willamette Valley Vineyards. So I asked for an internship and started working here in marketing, and that got me just exposure to a lot of the different departments of what it takes to run a winery. And from then it was just, I don't know, it's been in the blood, and I can't imagine doing anything else, and I was hooked. So.
And you have a history with your own wine, as I recall. You had your own wine label at one point, so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I started working here, I was a junior in college, and I was going to Oregon State, and I would work here 3 days a week and go to school, in the alternating days. And when I graduated in June 2010, I had no intentions of staying here, like to be within a mile of my parents' house, to be in the same zip code. It just didn't seem like that was, the dream for me at the time, or, that's not really where my drive was. And I'd studied in school entrepreneurship, and I'd always kind of run these little businesses growing up. Like I sold friendship bracelets, and I, was always a top salesperson in 4-H and Girl Scouts, anything I did that way. So what I decided to do was to move down to Southern Oregon into the Rogue Valley and start my own wine brand down there through the help of a lot of people down there. But it kind of seemed like a perfect region at the time because it was 4 hours away, but still Oregon, and still, had the same values that I've grown up with as far as agriculture and community. But it was in a region that's far more in its infancy than the Willamette Valley. So for someone that was 21 years old, to go down and be given the opportunity I had to actually go, make wine, sell my own wine, and be part of the Southern Oregon Winery Association, be part of kind of helping that wine region figure out who they were, was kind of exactly what I was doing in my personal life too. I was trying to figure out who I was and what I wanted to do, and I just love it down there. My wine brand was called God King Slave, which is pretty unusual for the wine industry. Probably wouldn't name it that now, but graduating from school, I didn't have a name in wine. I didn't have land I owned. I had nothing. Right, I started off with no really idea even of what I wanted to make in wine or do. And so I named my brand after kind of more of a mantra, or what I wanted to accomplish, and that was, create like a god, command like a king, and work like a slave, and work so hard that you kind of, someday make it. Down there in Southern Oregon, that was just a great community and time. I was down there between 2010 and 13.
And you came back here, and you mentioned you're here you started as an intern, and you work your way all the way up to Winery Director, I believe is your title now. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that journey. It's pretty quick. Mm-hmm. So tell us about that journey and kind of the steps you've taken and sort of what you've learned along the way, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, anytime you do your own wine brand, I think that you learn a lot, because when you're the person that's making payroll and making wine and selling wine and delivering the wine, you just get a crash course in what it takes to do it, and then can transfer a lot of those skills into just doing it at a bigger scale. But really I wasn't intending to come back, and I was loving my time in Southern Oregon, and it was a call from Jim Bruneau that I got that just asked when I was going to be back up in the area, if I was going to come back for a holiday or to visit family. And, I didn't know what it was about. I thought maybe it was just a check-in, as he's always been a really strong mentor for me. So it wasn't unusual to get a call that was like, hey, how are you doing? I planned that. I came back and met with him in February 2013. And we were up in our founder's room. And the question that started the conversation was like this. It was, what do you think about taking my job? And I sat there and was like, well, what would you do? Because, Jim is this place. Jim is this brand. He's brought all these people together and made this winery what it is. And, I wasn't privy to the conversations that he was starting to develop his succession plan, and really wasn't even paying attention really of the time and place in the Oregon wine industry we are. We are in this time where the first generation is passing things down, and what an incredible time to be here, because we're still working with the first generation founders and pioneers. Just right away I kind of felt the weight of the conversation and how much of an opportunity that would be, and it didn't seem like a decision at all. It seemed like on the drive home, all I was thinking about is like, oh my gosh, what's this going to be like doing this process? So I came back to work April 1st, 2013, and started back leading marketing and direct sales, and then built in vineyards and winemaking, and now all of our business development through our new wineries. And we're on a very intentional, very deliberate, slow transition, as Jim still has a lot to offer and is very active day to day in our company. But unfortunately that can't be the case long term. And so we do have a succession plan, and it's quite an honor to work, as closely as I get to him, and to hear his story, and take this platform of where we are now, and see where it goes in my 30 to 40 years that I get to lead it. Because I kind of look back and think, my wine brand in Southern Oregon means a lot to me, and it would have taken me a long time to get where Jim was, if ever. Mm-hmm. He's done incredible things here, and so this just seems like such a platform. So,
did he ever talk with you about? It seems like out of the blue, why he chose you, why you were the one he wanted to take over for him or to do this transition?
In working here, we always had a really strong bond and relationship, and I think a lot of times people that are inspired by entrepreneurship are often magnets to other entrepreneurs, right? And you keep tabs on people that you think are doing, great work, and just kind of paving a way. And so I think that we just share that spirit. Mm-hmm. And I think that our connection of actually growing up here means a lot too. Jim is a native Oregonian. He was the first native Oregonian to start a winery. And, I take that really seriously in how I treasure this land and the place we have here. And so I see it as, I have a responsibility and a duty, but take a lot of pride in it.
You mentioned you had kind of a long, slow plan. I'm curious, you talked about kind of different areas in which you've worked. Mm-hmm. How did you come to that plan? How was that arranged in terms of what you would learn and in what order and how you would do it?
Yeah, the plan is probably, it's kind of a roadmap of, here's the competencies like right now in our industry to really serve our employee base and to serve our, investors. It's kind of weird to say that because being publicly held, it's just such a foreign concept sometimes in wine, but that's really important. And so we kind of do it based on skill and competency and kind of put that to a plan. But really, truly, it's a lot of it is A lot of it is working through experience. Like, we're such a different business right now than we even were back in 2013. And so sometimes we've done this, we've laid it out, but then there's other times that I'm like, man, Jim, keep holding on. I just don't know if I'm there yet. Because we're tackling such big things right now. Sure. And it's great to have a partner. And I have no need to be that person to kick him out. I want him to stick around as long as he can. So if he watches this, I hope he's okay with that.
Speaking of the publicly owned, talk about that. You're the only one in the state. That decision was made a little while ago. I'm curious about why the decision was made and how that changes or doesn't change what Willamette Valley Vineyards is.
Yes, it's in our identity. It's part of our origin story, and really it's an incredible story, and it's becoming, business formation like this is actually becoming quite popular. So really what happened is Jim planted the vineyard back in 1983 with no intention of, and no plans for a winery. It was, he wanted to clear his 15 acres, he wanted to plant his Pinot Noir, his Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, and he wanted to be a farmer. And he wanted to sell his crop and did. He sold his first vintage to Dickie Rath. And after a year, I don't know if it was, if that was pretty quick, what was going through his mind, but he just decided after that time I really didn't want to let go of this fruit. I want to make it into wine now. And the only way for me to do that is to get others involved that believe that, we can do it, and that there is an Oregon wine industry that's possible here. Because there wasn't a cluster of wineries. There really wasn't, any confidence from a public perspective. And so what he did was, he believed in that if he could get enough people, wine enthusiasts, to invest, that they could do it together. And now we call this crowdfunding, right? And it's very common. And but back then, this was so unheard of that it was actually against the law to receive small amounts of investment. We're talking $2,500 from people. It was against the law for him to take money this way. You were only allowed so many non-accredited investors. And Jim didn't even have friends that qualified as accredited investors. He was 28 years old. I'm 31. I don't know these people either. So instead, he actually went and he changed some legislation. He had, his schooling and background work was in lobbying. He'd been working with the Oregon Wine Growers Association to create their semi-public organization and working. So he has a real understanding of the legal structure that way. And so he actually made it possible, and then did the first and never to be repeated self-underwritten public stock offering, and attracted about 2,000 wine enthusiasts that invested about $2,000 to $2,500 was their original investment. And it was enough to make our first wine and to build our winery facility. And then in 1994, we actually qualified for the NASDAQ. And we're one of the smallest companies on the NASDAQ, probably the smallest manufacturing company on the NASDAQ. And there's other wineries that are publicly held. There's Crimson Wine Group, there's Constellation, there's a parent company of Argyle, but not in this way. These people are people that are here wine tasting in our tasting room right now. They volunteer on our bottling line. They volunteer doing the topping in the barrel cellar. They volunteer at events and pouring wine. Like, these are people that are part of the brand and live the brand in their way. And we're up to over 16,000 wine enthusiast owners now. And, we have dreams of more, because it's such an emotional connection when you own a piece of this winery and a piece of the success. We say it's the only stock you can own where you can drink yourself to a profit. But there's a lot that comes with being publicly held. You are judged quarterly on earnings. You have to make very smart financial decisions for your investors. We have an accounting team that's significant just to keep up with compliance and auditing. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's very complex structure. And there's also, quite a bit of costs that we could take on to keep our public status, about $500,000 a year. And so that makes us have to, you know, be a little larger in scale as far as what we sell in order to pay and cover those expenses. But in general, the business structures work so well for us, because when Jim started his first offering back in 1989, within 3 years, he was the leading winery in Oregon. And that was because all those people just became his customers. And a lot of the trade, a lot of independent wine shops, Orville Roth, who this barrel cellar is named after, you know, when they became owners, they started really supporting the wine. And now that is seen across the country. Like, I just got back from a trip in Las Vegas, and I was working with the distributor and doing a sales meeting, and I was like, is there anyone that's a winery owner in here? And like 3 hands raised. And, you know, that's a few states away. So it's really exciting to see.
I'm curious if usually when we talk about wineries, especially Oregon wineries, you're talking about usually a singular or maybe a shared vision by one person or maybe a couple or something. I'm curious how that changes sort of when you have 16,000 visions, in addition to you and Jim and other people like that. So I'm curious how you balance all of that.
Well, the purpose of the ownership is to be very diversely held. So there's not, you know, majority voices that are really dictating the mission of the company, which is, you know, to continue to tell the Oregon story through wine. Like, we're very clear in that, and people buy into that. So there's not any, you know, there's not any exterior force that's pressurizing us to do one thing or the other. In fact, I think it's probably stronger, and we feel that this community funding really helps us serve the community really well. You know, they care that we are stewards of the land. They care about our environmental practices. They care that we're estate grown, and they've helped us kind of create this set of standards and expectations and values that we hold, and it's served us very well.
I'm curious how you personally approach a job with so many responsibilities as you've had, and how you sort of maintain any kind of like work-life balance with all of the things you have to do while also trying to, you know, live away from the winery.
Well, I don't live that far away from the winery. I can get home in, you know, 2 miles, so it's not that far. But, you know, I think that everyone has a different opinion of work-life balance. I tend to like to take on a lot, and I like the pace of being challenged and pushed. And when I don't feel that is actually when I feel like I'm not doing my best work. So I kind of like the chase. I like, I love the size of this winery. We have 200 employees, you know, 70 of which are out in the vineyards. But there's a lot of people to take care of, so I like that pressure and responsibility. And you know, my husband also works in wine. He works for our distributor. So even when I go home, I get to hear about wine quite a bit. But one of the things I think that helps, like, in the balance is, you know, being a learner. Go and learn outside of the wine industry, and go and learn, like, whether it's a new hobby or you know, some type of adventure in Oregon, or just have something that is where you're kind of constantly curious. That's oftentimes how I get refreshed. So when I'm out of the winery here, but I'm, you know, down at the local brewery, like, I want to know all about what they're doing, like, and that is kind of what I need to reset. Is just some outside perspective and a new opportunity to learn.
Or something like Dancing with the Salem Stars, for example.
Yeah, so embarrassing. Oh my God. Yeah.
At least you won.
Well, yeah, I know. I'm really competitive, and so so my husband sells wine in the local community. He works for Young's Market Company as the on-premise sales rep, and so he sells wine to the Elsinore Theater. And he had signed me up. Not myself. I would never have signed up to do that. And in fact, I asked them when they finally called me, and they were like, "Will you participate in this charity event called Salem Dancing with the Stars?" And I go, "What qualifies me to be a Salem star?" You know, I'm kind of confused by that. And they were like, "It's pretty much just the agreement to embarrass yourself in public." And I was like, "Okay, I'll do that." But then I hadn't really watched the TV show very much, so I had to, like, get a crash course, thank God, to Hulu, and so I could see how it works. I didn't even know the name of the dances. So when I got the Viennese waltz, I thought it was the Vietnamese waltz, and I was like, I don't understand. What's the Asian influence? And it was the most embarrassing thing ever. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
So I'm curious, when you were starting your brand in Southern Oregon, you were involved in the winemaking as well as everything else. I'm curious how you sort of developed a winemaking style or philosophy.
Well, everything was done in like barter and trade. So when I was down there, I didn't have very much money. I just graduated college, and in fact, I took the excess of my student loans, and I took selling apple stock that I had purchased as part of a college course and as part of the Apple stock plan, and cash those out in order to start. And I started making with 4 barrels of wine. In those 4 barrels, I mean, I purchased, neutral oak barrels for $25. So this was very minimal startup funds. And I wrote a marketing and sales plan for a small winery down there in exchange for, faith on a fruit contract. And I made wine in a partnered facility that I paid custom crush for, but that there was a winemaker there named Rob Fullen that helped with a lot of mentorship and guidance, and also had a winemaking partner as well. So there was a lot of help in this project, and I think even in working here, I just have such an appreciation for very classic, very traditional styles of winemaking. With Pinot Noir in the Willamette Valley, there's a very clear direction what you're trying to do, and that sense of place, and to showcase, the vintage and what the time with the earth, what everything was doing that year. And so it was really just kind of carrying that down to Southern Oregon. I mean, Southern Oregon actually has really similar conditions down there as we do up here. They are really are growing on the climatic edge for most of those varietals down there. So I was making Syrah and Tempranillo my first year, and I was making wine in 2009, which was a warm vintage, and then in 2010, very challenging vintage. And we didn't pick, until late October. So, this season I remember still doing quite a bit of work on Thanksgiving that year. And so, I think, but it was just a lot of trial and error. In fact, with my brand down there, I always thought that I would make varietal wines, kind of like how we do in the Willamette Valley. We make Pinot Noir, we make Chardonnay, we make Pinot Gris. And I tried my Tempranillo. I was like, oh my God, this is never going to be ready. This is like 3 years it needs to age. It's really tannic. And then tried the Syrah, and I'm like, oh, the Syrah is so beautiful. And so then it was kind of like, well, maybe I'll just try a little bit of both. And so I ended up making a red blend. So, there was no intention, there was no plan. It was just getting a feel for it and learning and doing it all yourself. Even going out and doing like the leafing passes or seeing the spray programs on your fruit, or, you learn. Sure. There's no better learning opportunity than just actually, being alongside vines, being in the cellar, seeing what's going on.
So how involved are you with the winemaking here then?
Yeah, so my office is right next to the head winemaker office, and so Joe Ibrahim, our head winemaker here, he leads all the day-to-day winemaking decisions and team, bottling, everything. So the things that I get to be a part of is blending, which is great, and all the work that we need to support production. So whether that's planning, planning the quantities of wine we're going to make, the stylistic goals of the wines, what markets are going to serve, how does the wine look and feel as far as packaging, all of that comes up. But probably, just as important is all the vineyards. So, working with our vineyard manager, we farm over 500 acres now. Weekly doing vineyard visits, making sure everything is going to hit quality goals, and, what programs the wine's going into is really important, especially this time of year. Mm-hmm. We did a 12-hour vineyard visit on Monday. The reason I'm wearing this jacket is because I have a good sunburn to prove it. But it's important to see, what the conditions are out there, what we're going to have to deal with during harvest.
So what makes good wine, in your opinion?
What makes good wine? A great site, mm-hmm. and timely execution. You never get to go back on your pick decision. You have to be really smart with your cellar hygiene and your cellar procedures. And everything's about there's really short windows of time in wine. In fact, we make wine in Walla Walla, and I was just with a wine reviewer yesterday showing those wines for the first time. And, he asked, so many people got it wrong in this specific vintage up there. What made it right? And I was sitting with our winemaker up there, John, and John was like, you know what? I live there. And so for me, the picking window is within, 6 to 12 hours. It is not, I need to drive and go check the fruit, then line up a pick decision. So it's like we're getting exactly what we want.
You mentioned earlier some of the changes here, even since 2013 when you were there, and you mentioned also Walla Walla. That's one of the changes is the Oregon Estate Vineyards. Tell us a little bit about that, how that came about, and sort of what the goals are.
Yeah. Well, it's Oregon Estate Vineyards is a new division of our company that I co-founded with our founder, Jim Burnell. And what it is for us is we believe that there's more to the Oregon wine story than just Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. We're not naive. We think that there's a lot of amazing things out there. And when you look at Oregon, geographically, size-wise, you could lay, the country of France over it and just, cut along the edges. There's so many microclimates here that we just haven't discovered yet. And that's really our mission. It's very much a mission-driven a program and project that we think that there's more microclimates in Oregon to discover, and it just takes someone to do the work, right? I mean, without David Lett coming to the Willamette Valley or Bill Fuller coming to the Willamette Valley, we might not be sitting around this table today. Same with the pioneers over in Walla Walla, Gary Figgins and others. So, where we started was kind of a conversation that was, if you weren't making wine in, here, at our 3 estate vineyards, where would you be making it? And immediately the conversation kind of jumped to Walla Walla. There's, really exciting things that are going on over there. They have amazing fruit quality. I've always really admired their wineries and, their commitment to quality and creating a world-class wine region, similar to what we've been doing over here in the Willamette Valley. And so Jim just encouraged me. He was like, well, why don't you go over there and see what they're up to? And this was around Christmas, 2014, and it was the day after New Year's, so not much time had passed, that I was driving over through the Columbia Gorge just to, knock on some doors and learn what people were up to. And it is a desolate time of year to be driving to Walla Walla. It was maybe 20-some degrees over there, and I met up with Norm McKibben of Pepperbridge and Amavi, and he's kind of considered the godfather of Walla Walla. And I asked him, I was like, so Norm, if you were new coming over to learn about Walla Walla, what should I know? And he was like, well, let's get in my car. And so we got in his car, and it's a 1994 blue Toyota Corolla. And I was like, surely this isn't going to be this isn't going to get us around vineyards in Walla Walla. I think I'm going to end up pushing this car today. And he tells me now that he has a vineyard truck, but that was just what he was driving that day. But he drove me out to the Oregon side of the Walla Walla Valley, and I was kind of surprised to be back in Oregon, right? And he takes me up the North Slope that overlooks the whole Walla Walla Valley, and there's a 2,700 acre property that he purchased with a group of other winery owners, Chris and Gary Figgins of Leonetti, Marty Clubb of Lake Hole, and himself. And they purchased this farmland from the Mormon Church. They actually had to do it blindly because the Mormon Church wasn't going to sell land that was farmed as wheat to any wine growers. And but eventually they got the land, and they built in water rights and a really technologically advanced vineyard development. It's just, it's one of a kind. I've never seen anything like it. And it just immediately, once we were up there, it's rugged. It just has so much presence and spirit to it. It's so windy. The terroir and the soil is like, there's 2 different versions. There's the fractured basalt that looks like nothing would grow in it. And then there's this like rock flower, which is called Luss. And so we drove around and walked around and spent most of the day out there. And, I called Jim, our founder, right away and was like, Jim, we have to be here. And he was like, we just started talking about this idea. I was like, no, we need it. what can we do? And Jim, gave it some thought, and I came back, and then he was like, well, let's go back and look at it. I was like, okay. So on the drive back over to Walla Walla, another 4 hours in the car, we strategized how we could do it, which was bringing back our roots of our public offering and offering shares in these new winery projects. So Pamberin over in Walla Walla on the Oregon side was one of our first. We have our Elton Winery out in Eola Amity Hills. Now we have a project in the Rocks District of Milton Freewater, so another one on the east side, in an amazing new AVA. And then our latest one, our newest addition, is the Brno Estate, which is kind of fun to actually now have a winery that will be, in Jim's legacy. And that's going to be in the Dundee Hills, dedicated to biodynamic farming and method champenois sparkling wine. So,
wow, nice.
Yeah. So now there's, a lot of these brands and wineries that are being developed, and it's hard to keep a track of all the planting and all the planning, but really exciting times.
Excellent. Since you have a background in terms of like marketing, things like that, I'm curious about a few questions about sort of marketing and sales. First of all, I know direct sales is kind of the new thing in the wine industry. I'm curious how that's changed even in the time you've been in the wine industry, sort of the direct sales approach. Yeah,
I mean, direct sales isn't, now it's so important, it's a survival tactic, right? So back when Jim started, the 3-tier system was the only way. You went, to your distributor, to the retailer, to the customer, and that chain of command, you just had to play by those rules. And that system is very antiquated. It was set up after Prohibition as a safeguard to consumers. And, really more operates in that structure now as a controlling mechanism, right? Well, now with the way that we, interact with consumers, whether it's digital, through social media, or through our tasting rooms, we have a personal connection with the people that are enjoying our wine that they never had before. We've had it before. We've actually always had it because of the way that we're funded. So the communities and the customers always been part of this winery. So our direct-to-consumer sales has always been a real emphasis here at Willamette Valley Vineyards. But now it's nice to see it's supported by the whole industry. And there's such an amazing tourism and agritourism and ecotourism industry that's building up around us, because you do need the hoteliers, you need the restaurateurs, you need all of this to create these experiences that people are seeking, done in an Oregon way, right? But it is exciting now. It's so competitive in wholesale. I just don't think that you could probably start a new wine project or a new winery without maybe a lot of connections and get a lot of distribution or representation. So what is their option? And that's direct to consumer. And that's what we're heavily investing in. All of these brands I just talked about before are all direct to consumer brands that will have an experience on the vineyard site and have ways that the customer gets to interact with the place, the vineyard, the winemaking. And that's really important to what customers are looking for now. They don't, the shopping experience is so different. Even when you're in the grocery store, you can find all the information yourself through your phone. People are also, there's a big movement right now as the world is now global. It's borderless essentially, to really behave very locally and very tribal. And I think that there's a trend in the wine industry of even more local and more supporting your AVA that you prefer or you live in, or just your immediate area. We see that a lot with craft brewing. There's a brewery every neighborhood, and it becomes the identity for them is the neighborhood. That happens in wine too. So we've done a lot of work to understand, we're usually within the top 5 by volume for Oregon wineries, and we used to think that we were a national brand. And when we looked up our customer base, our direct-to-consumers, 70% of our wine club is within 70 miles of us. Wow. 60% of our winery owners are within 70 miles of us. We are just a very high-performing local brand, and I think that that's what most Oregon wineries are.
So you mentioned kind of the competition for wholesale, but there's also obviously a huge competition for direct sales because there's so many wineries now. So what are some of the challenges that you face, even as one of the bigger fish in the state, when it comes to direct sales and when it comes to just sort of getting a foothold in the market?
Yeah, the challenge right now for us as we're trying to do these 4 winery build-outs is construction costs. And, the economy is doing so well, and then there's the downsides that there's not enough people to, do the work on these construction projects, especially of, these sizes, and find subs to do the work. So, everything, the bids have come in so high, so delayed, that it's a challenge to even build the experiences that we want to. And, I think that capacity will be built in the economy for us to do so. Hopefully in the next couple of years, we can have these open. So that's one of the challenges. But really, like from the producer side, is you have to have an authentic experience now for people. People don't want to just come and taste 4 wines behind a bar. It's not. That used to be, the expectation of wine tasting, and isn't the expectation of wine tasting anymore. People want to learn. They want to, they're choosing to spend their leisure time doing this, so they want to have fun. They want to, be able to do something that's maybe hands-on or enjoy food while they're doing it. Because, Americans, we select our activities based around our dietary needs, right? That's how we celebrate. And so you have to, I kind of feel bad actually now, because back when I was in Southern Oregon in 2010, I would have been able to figure out a direct-to-consumer strategy through a tasting room with minimal investment. And now I feel bad for small producers because it's like, even to play the game is in the millions.
Right.
And so does that weed out your artisans and the people that are your storytellers and your innovators and the creative types that it takes to run this industry? I don't know, I just have a real heart for them because deep down, that's how I feel about myself in the wine industry. Even though I run this business, I still feel like the reason I got into it was to be this passionate winemaker. And I want this industry to be full of them, but we have to make it that they can. And so some of the Oregon State Vineyards work has actually been, finding the best and brightest winemakers to work with and partner them with an estate vineyard that we own and allow them to do that craft. John Murray up at for our Pambrin wines and our Maison Blue wines is an excellent example of that. He's one of the most talented winemakers, and he was having his own brand. He would have been able to do well. But it's like the cost of entry and the cost of capital and all this, it would have just been such a struggle. And now we can take on that burden for him, and he can just go make great wine.
Sure.
So,
is that something that's going to get worse in terms of you talk about the cost of entry being so high? The industry was founded by a lot of people who were, like you mentioned, kind of the storyteller, the artist. Is it possible now to still do that?
I think it's still possible. I think that you can, contract fruit, and maybe you can do pop-ups, or you can do, lists, and, create a personality and persona for your brand. But it's hard. It's harder. And, for me, land prices are really high, and I look at, even the potential of everyone having a state vineyard is not even possible anymore. But then in the global wine conversation, Oregon looks like a steal, right?
Sure.
We have all these people coming up from California because our land prices are between, $15,000 and $40,000 an acre of bare land, and I look at that and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to work really hard to buy an acre of land. And then plant it.
That's just owning it, right?
Right.
So you talk about sales. I'm also curious how marketing has changed, even in the few years you've been doing it. It's changed, obviously, I'm assuming drastically. So how has it changed, and what does it look like the changes will continue?
Well, everyone has their own, philosophies about marketing. I think, for me, it kind of comes down to storytelling, and that's how our brand markets. It's, we are storytellers of what we're doing, of who we're working with, and so I don't think that, I don't think that's necessarily changed, but I think the customer is very interested in story and that authentic story, that knowing that there's people behind projects, that there's real land behind projects, that these aren't like virtual wines, virtual wine brands. But the way in which we do is really different. So, we have, much more emphasis on digital marketing, social media. In fact, that's usually what we're all focused on in the marketing office are those, the photo, the video, how you're getting the story out. But, like retailing in general, it's being disrupted right now, and it's still kind of a wait and see of how that's going to shake up. Like, in the future, it doesn't matter which page in search your wine is. Man, I hope it's not alphabetical, because Willamette Valley Vineyards is going to be at the end. I hope it's by relevance. I hope it's by, consumer profiling, quality attributes. But I do get a little bit nervous about that. If you have to make first page results on Amazon, does that mean that there's only 5 or 10 wines that someone's going to see to make a decision? Right. At least now we have a shelf that at the local Safeway has, 1,000 SKUs. Right. And so I do get nervous about that type of retailing and how to market there. It's a changing world in retail.
Sure. I'm curious also, every time we go to this, like the symposium or something like that, you hear about sort of the youthening of wine buying and how to appeal to millennials, how to appeal to Gen X kids like me. So what is the change? You talk about the change in terms of like the story, in terms of the authenticity of the local. So how do you reach the people? You talk about social media and digital. So how does that happen? Well,
I actually think I have an opposing view.
Okay.
So I think that, like right now, I'd probably say our average customer is between 55 and 60 as far as who's really buying and supporting the Willamette Valley Vineyards anchor brand. Okay. And I kind of think 55 to 60-year-olds aren't going away. There's going to be a lot of people that become 50 to 60, 45 to 60. And so I don't put a whole lot of focus as needing to make the brand younger or bringing people up. I think that we're going to, through what we're doing and through how people between 40 and 65 spend their money, is wine is a natural choice, and our brand really speaks to them. We are a heritage, classic, traditional brand, stewards of the land, very environmentally focused, and those type of values, I think resonate with those age groups, and I think can continue to resonate with those age groups. And I just look at the cycle of my life, right? I'm 31, and right now it's all about buying a house. It's all about, I just got married, and you're just focused on different things than pure leisure and socializing, right? But by the time I'm 45 to 65 or older, when I have time to enjoy, I bet you'll be doing a lot more discretionary income activities. And so I go off of the life cycle, or the life cycles we all have. And I think that there are brands that should certainly cater to younger audiences. Convenience brands makes a whole lot of sense. I don't think I see many 65-year-olds drinking wine out of a can. But for our wine, for Pinot Noir and for single vineyard Chardonnays and sparkling wines, is there really anything wrong with continuing to sell to people that are 40 and older? I don't see anything wrong with that.
It's a good answer. I like that. As we were here today, there's 1,000 things going on in the winery, as you mentioned.
Sorry.
No. I'm curious about how you tackle having that many different things going on, and what your overall goal of having all the events here is.
Well, tackling on a day-to-day basis feels like war, like battle of surviving the day, really, truly. You have to get in the mindset of fast pace and growth, and I love that mindset, but it's not for everyone. And culturally too, within our company, we really screen and are looking for people to add to the team that like that. But it doesn't work out 100% of the time. But as a bigger picture, we have a very clear strategic plan that's 5 years out, and we have really clear plan for succession, and we have really clear plans for what our business targets are for performance indicators, and for developing and growing our staff, retaining them, affording them more opportunities. We know where we want to go buy land next. We have a lot of these things. So you have to use the big picture and the 30,000 foot view to balance the day-to-day race. So, and you have to build in time to focus on that. So, it's hard being in this growth mode to sometimes get out of the weeds a little bit, but that's where I can provide the most value to the winery right now.
Curious what winery associations you're a part of in the area.
Yeah, so I'm on the board for the Willamette Valley Winery Association, and we're a member there, and also we're a member of the Oregon Wine Board and Oregon Wine Growers Association. And then some of the smaller sub-appellations, as we have our Elton Vineyard in the Eola Amity Hills. We'll soon be joining the Dundee Hills, as we now have a vineyard there. We're part of the Walla Walla Wine Alliance. We're a founding member now, as we're starting to get the Rocks District of Milton Freewater Wine Alliance built up. So there's a lot of meetings.
Tell me a little about your experience with the WVWA on the board. What you're taking away from it, what you're putting into it. I'm curious how that balances with everything else you're doing.
Well, it's been a great time to be on the Willamette Valley Winery Association board because with the creation of the Willamette Pinot Noir wine auction, we now have a funding mechanism to where there are significant resources to do some of these aspirational projects that they've always dreamed to do, but never had funds for. And so, over the past 3 years, that auction has built up to provide, a great benefit for marketing projects. So there's a lot being done to drive tourism. There's a lot being done to just market Willamette Valley wines nationwide. I really love the work being done on some of these master classes for trade as well. I think they're very high quality. And it's also been exciting to see Oregon Pinot Camp now merge into being under the umbrella of Willamette Valley Winery Association, as I believe that was probably one of the most significant things our founders could have done in the early days to get people here. Because once you're here, you have an emotional connection with Oregon. You go back and you represent Oregon like you're a native, right? And it's amazing to see the alum from Oregon Pinot Camp, and when you go into the market and sell the wines, how significant of an experience that was for them. So I love that there's a connection there. We're also tackling some important issues with 100% labeling for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and conjunctive labeling to put Willamette Valley on all the bottles. And there's been research to show how that can improve, with Sonoma County doing it before us. So, those are kind of hot topics right now. We'll see how they pan out, but it's nice to learn and have a voice and, try to do what's best for the membership.
Can you explain those a little bit more for those who might not know, like me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, so they were 2 initiatives that were brought forth by Ken Wright and David Adelsheim. And the first one we'll talk on is 100% varietal labeling. So that would be anything labeled as Willamette Valley Pinot Noir would be 100%. And same with Chardonnay. And right now, Oregon already has the highest standards in the industry in the New World with 90%. And so this would be moving it from 90 to 100. And, I see pros and cons about that. I don't think it's 100% perfect, but I do see, their point of view of industry leadership, and truth in labeling has always been key for Oregon. We have very, very high standards already. So that's one that we're discussing now and is in the works this summer to go into a legislative session in the fall. And then the other one is conjunctive labeling, and that would be to preserve the Willamette Valley AVA as a quality designation. So with 6 sub-appellations and more coming online, you can easily put Yamhill Carlton on your label and maybe not include Willamette Valley. But what they're saying is that's made it so that the Willamette Valley appellation use maybe isn't considered in as high regard as a sub-appellation. So it would require you to put Willamette Valley if you were using a sub-appellation as well. there's give and take on that too. Is sometimes I really do believe that the more specific you can get with your sourcing, we make wines from single blocks, single vineyards, single AVAs, aviation or Appellation cuvées. I think it's important to be that specific with your sourcing and to describe it that way. But there's, but putting the Willamette Valley appellation maybe does preserve the quality that it's seen out there more. There are definitely things that I still don't have 100% opinions on.
Makes you a good board member there. You're still being convinced.
Right.
I'm curious about the location here. You have such a huge site, and yet you're not really near anybody else. I'm curious, sort of pros and cons of your location.
Yeah, when Jim found this site back in 1981, he was looking for land that was between 500 and 700 feet elevation, because that was the elevation of the Grand Cru vineyards in Burgundy. And he went into it with the mindset of what worked there must work here. And so he found a site that had that and was supported by Jory and Nakaya soil. And he wanted to work with, water retentive clay-based soils. And so the decision making back in the 80s, because there was no winery clusters, this was not a bad decision.
Nope.
But then as we saw, the wine industry grow up in Dundee, Newburgh, McMinnville, obviously it's hard to be out of that cluster now, as when consumers are making travel decisions and when media is going to wine country, they're driving straight on 99 and they can hit as many wineries as they can fit in weeks, right? And so that was important for us in the location of one of our Oregon State Vineyards projects was, we wanted to do a sparkling wine facility, and felt that this one vineyard location that I found in Dundee would really support that. And then it gave us what we've been working, 30 years to do, which is to have neighbors and to be right around everyone. So we're really excited, looking forward to that. But then there's things, we've been operating down here in our bubble. Like, for example, I get so much done because I don't have, a ton of visitors bothering me as far as, barrel salesmen and et cetera. So they'll be good and bad. And, things that have served us really well here is our proximity on I-5. So we catch a lot of out-of-state tourists that want an Oregon wine experience, but, aren't going that far west. We also are so close to Salem, which is a really growing community and very loyal to us. We are kind of the Salem winery, and it served us so well. We're the most visited tasting room in Oregon, not even being in wine country.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm curious what it's like being a woman in the Oregon wine industry.
I've been in the wine industry during times where it was not unusual at all. The first book I read about wine was Susan Sokolbosser's book, and I loved reading how her best time was spent on a tractor and doing the vineyard work. And I've always admired the Ponzi sisters for their work in the industry. And one time I was at a board meeting for the Willamette Valley Winery Association, and they only saw my head, and David Alstein put his hand on my shoulder and was like, Maria, it's so nice to see you. And so maybe I'm a third sister. But, there's lots of women winemakers here. I think, too, our connection with France and how many women winemakers are represented there. It's always been, I've never felt in the minority. I think the side of the business that has a lot of catching up to do is the distribution side. And when you look at the industry as a whole, they say that 5 to 10% women in distribution, and that is, that's wrong to me. And I think that there needs to be intentional, deliberate ways to support women and their voices and their development in those organizations. Because I believe that your company and your makeup of your employees should represent who you're serving. And we're trying to do that on our board of directors now. They say women are, make 60 to 70% of the wine purchasing decisions of the household. We represent our fair share as the consumers and the purchasers of this. So why don't, our distributors? Why don't our wineries? But here we're almost 60% women. Women have really been allowed to be empowered and developed here because we're so performance oriented. And I think that just in general, women are very results driven and, also very relational, but, they kind of feel like they have a lot to prove. And this is a great winery to come and prove it. So.
I'm also curious, in your specific instance, you've had a lot of success at a very young age. As you mentioned, you're on 31, and you've already had your own wine label, and you're second in command at one of the biggest wineries in the state. I'm curious if there's been any challenges with that, with having so much success sort of so quickly.
I'm trying to think of any specific examples that have been challenging. I think in general, maybe I haven't been taken seriously, but I wouldn't know it. But it's like being blonde, being pretty bubbly, probably talking more than I should. That's probably all gotten me in trouble. So, but yeah, I think, there's a lot of relationships that run pretty deep that are pretty hard to crack and get into. There's a lot of times when, you're probably, not maybe very welcomed at the table, but in general, I think that I've just tried to work really hard at being credible. I went back and did a lot of wine education, whether it's taking classes at UC Davis or, doing the WSET and a lot of wine certifications to try to have that formal knowledge to fall back on that built my confidence. Mm-hmm. It was never for anyone else, but it was to build my confidence so that when I'm in a tasting group with a lot of winemakers that I felt, that I was bringing something to contribute to. And on the business side, I've always tried to be part of a lot of peer groups and, develop and help improve others and kind of rise together. So right now, there's a great group of us that are all kind of around the same age that are taking over family businesses or, coming into second generational opportunities, or even just succession planning, and that's great to have other people that are kind of going through the same thing and have similar challenges.
I'm curious now that your future is kind of inextricably tied to Willamette Valley Vineyards. So I'm curious, as you look into that future, you're talking earlier 30, 40 years, mm-hmm. What do you see for yourself, and mm-hmm. what do you hope and see for the facility?
Yeah, Jim says that right now is the most exciting time in his time in the industry, which is great to be a part of. And I think he feels that way because, back in the early days, you were worried every step along the way of if you were going to survive and advance, your business. These are small businesses. And now we have, a level of maturity and establishment and land holdings and talented people that we can work with, that we're in a very secure place. And anytime you meet that human need of security is kind of then when you can get creative, right? And you don't have the stress and the pressure of survival, you have creation mode and you have self-realization and actualization coming. And so I look at a lot of our new projects with the Oregon Estate Vineyards. I look at a lot of what we're trying to do in building a destination for wine enthusiast travelers and tourists. And I also look at our initiative of taking the Oregon story on the road. We have a new project that's doing that. Probably one of the first experiences from an Oregon winery to go outside of the state. And I look at those and I think that, these are lifelong projects. You don't plant a vineyard in the Rocks District of Milton Freewater to prove and to reach success in 3 years. Right. I mean, these are, when I'm 50, 60, 70 years old, I'm probably going to feel like that was a good decision. Hopefully. It takes that long. It takes that long to establish, great vineyard sites and quality winemaking consistently and high scores and take care of your people. But I kind of think that this is just the beginning and we're launching from here.
Do you have any, not necessarily number, but like a specific goal in mind? Is something you'd like to see during your time here?
My big, hairy, audacious goal?
Exactly. Let's hear it.
Well, I want to make 100-point wine here in Oregon. That's my biggest goal.
That's a good goal.
I write it on everything as the start of what I want to do. Like, I'm making these decisions today to make 100-point wine. And that's the quality lens you have to look through if that, you're making these, because they become longer-term goals when you make them with that goal in mind. Other things, I'd love to. We make wine in Southern Oregon through our Griffin Creek brand. We make wine in Walla Walla. We make wine here in the Willamette Valley. But I'd like to make wine, in a lot more regions that will just become available to us now. There's the Snake River AVA. That's kind of interesting. I know nothing about it. Columbia Gorge. There's Umpqua Valley. There's a lot of places that I think some great things can happen. Coastal ranges that will open up. So I think just continuing to explore and learn and just set it up well for the next generation too. So make sure that the people that come here into Oregon, those of us around here, continue to treat each other really well. To keep that collaborative spirit is a big deal. And make sure that we have clean air, clean water, fertile land to grow. This is an agricultural product. We just can't pick it up and move.
Sure. As you mentioned that, what do you see in the future for the Oregon wine industry at large?
With so many brands here, it's going to get competitive, and it's already a bloodbath out in distribution. So I don't think things are getting easier. So I think it's going to take our best ideas and our hardest work to keep carving our place, keep proving it, and just don't rest on your laurels. And I think, we have such great people here in this industry that will do it. I think that this is the most exciting state to be in right now in all of wine. And don't take that for granted. Keep it there. It took, what was it? Last year was 50 years for Oregon Pinot Noir. Is that right? And, look where we are in just 50 years. But in 50 years from now, after all this foundational work, if we keep pushing this hard, we could have double the plantings. We could, be making wine to 100-point quality consistently. It's exciting.
What are some of the obstacles to that? What are some of the challenges you see down the road?
Certainly global warming is a challenge. I'm, very concerned about that, and are we making good decisions setting up the vineyards for success in the future? Because the decisions we make now, they come to light, 10, 20 years from now. So clonal material, rootstock, what's going to happen with water, very relevant. Other things, for challenges for Oregon, it's hard right now to see that the people that it takes to make our industry run, and the people that really make it possible for us to do what we do in this room, they aren't making living wages. It's very challenging to see that people that work in the tasting room, can't afford homes anywhere around where we are. They can't maybe even afford new tires for their car. Same with the vineyard. So what are we going to do to provide enough value in our companies and our businesses to take care of this workforce? Because these are the people that are the face of our brands. They do the hardest work. And, we have to keep them here, and we have to keep them here in ways that they can afford to live. And so, I'm starting to think about, do we need to provide employee housing? Do we need to, what is it that we need to be attractive, but not just attractive to get good talent, is how can we make this their career? There can be a career sharing stories with people in the winery, in the tasting room, but we have to make it to where we're strong enough financially to, to compensate these people. They do really hard work.
Sure.
So that's something that I really want to figure out. I think we've done a good job, setting up things like Salud to take care of healthcare. So what do we need to do to look after our people in more facets of survival?
Sure. Do you see the growth that we're going through right now being something that sustains for a while longer in terms of number of wineries, number of vineyards? Or do you see kind of an end in sight where there will be more consolidation or something along those lines?
Yeah, I think that this is a tough time in the industry, as a lot of people, got into it as hobbyists, farmers and winemakers, and they don't have maybe brands that would have probably a way to, value brand, right? They have a place, they have pretty facilities, but do they have a brand that if someone were to come in and buy it, does the brand live on without the founder, without the couple working in the tasting room? There's a lot of these type of business owners right now in the industry, and I just don't know if there is much hope for that, other than if there's a lot of people making money to come in and then buy these operations. Maybe there is, but I think that there's probably a lot of consolidation on the future. As what other options do some of these winery owners have to be able to afford retirement, because a lot of them have been putting everything they earn back into their businesses. Jim lived in a single wide trailer for most of his creation of Willamette Valley Vineyards, and upgraded to a double wide, and just 4 years ago built a home. That's a founder that all his money went back into this winery to get us to where we are now. And a lot of them have these type of stories. So how do they provide for their families and provide for themselves in their retirement years if they don't do something like this? I hope that there's other options, like partnering with Willamette Valley Vineyards.
What advice would you have for someone starting off in the wine industry today? It could be any level of the wine industry, but what advice would you give them?
I would say that if you're selecting a job, the best advice I have is find people or an area that best support your learning. Moving to Southern Oregon was the best decision I made, because I went and worked for a winery called Troon Vineyard and did all of their direct sales and general managed their winery, and I was 22. And I got an incredible opportunity to go and really work with the owners there and get a lot of learning opportunity. And they took a risk hiring me. I had, nothing to back up anything down there. But that was just an opportunity. As I worked with someone that was like, she has capability. She wants it. She has hunger. She has drive. And find people that believe in you that way, because the mentorship quality is what will take you the furthest, and that will get you the networks you need and the where you want to go. The other thing is, it's I say don't be afraid to wear a lot of hats in the beginning, and then find where your passion is. Like, truth be told, I don't want to be working 100 hours at Harvest anymore. Like, I feel too old for that. My winemakers are amazing, but I did it. I put in my time. I put in some time. I learned it, so now I can help support them the best. But I wanted to move to a little different side where I was building, wineries and brands, and working, on aspects of the business as well. But I'm sure glad that, I've had to clean out a few tanks and presses, so I have empathy. I was really cold. I drank a lot of beer and ate a lot of pizza.
That's the whole plan right there, right?
Yeah, I think that's how I got compensated as well.
So that's all the questions that I have for you. Is there anything else I should have asked? Anything else you'd like to talk about at the end here?
No.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and your answers and your candor.